Hi, and welcome to the Live Better Connected podcast. Now, today I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about fraud, and this is an issue that impacts millions of people up and down the country, and particularly mobile phone fraud. But there's a lot going on, particularly behind the scenes. So today we've got James Harwood from Virgin Media O2. Hello, James.
Hi, Gareth.
So you are as I understand, the fraud strategy and product owner, and you cover fraud. So what is going on?
Just a bit. So I ultimately head up and fraud strategy here at VMO2 with the purpose of protecting our customers, our consumers. And ultimately, me and my team's job is to identify, manage, and kind of mitigate the fraud risks, protecting our customers and the general public. We closely monitor fraud and the kind of behaviour of scammers, putting in place kind of measures and such. For example, 2023 alone, we blocked £250 million worth of suspected fraud that potentially impacted our customers.
And just onto that scale, just to add to that, I think we've got figures here of around 5.7 million people across the country have been scammed by mobile phone, and often 10 or more times in some cases, particularly with the older generation being affected. And Ofcom stated that 8 in 10 people have experienced it, but fewer in 10 reporting. We'll come on to the reporting side of things. So it does seem to be a growing problem, particularly around sort of periods of heavy sort of Black Friday shopping periods, Christmas, or even sort of storms or disasters. The scammers seem to find every way to try and defraud the public.
We observe the same patterns, whether it's big tech, big product launches, when new devices kind of come into the market. But similar to the story, and a lot of this is premised around social engineering. We see these peaks at times of whether it's budget cuts or challenges in terms of financially, or other news that may be out there, stuff like 5G switchovers and bits like that. We will find that all of these will be targeted when it comes to our customers, and new examples such as Black Friday, Cyber Monday, product launches. They're all spikes, or we observe spikes in all of these.
And just to give us a typical example, what would a scam text look like? What are the kind of things that these scammers use? Because they're very clever.
A couple of bits. I suppose, first of all, just acknowledging that fraud is an epidemic at UK and globally, and some of the stats out there are quite scary, to be fair, but fraud is 40% of all crime, and these are from the latest Home Office kind of stats. And that's also the fact the majority of frauds aren't even reported. So they're just the frauds we know about. The majority of frauds go unreported back to government. I think we always call out that we're very much fighting professional organisations here when it comes to fraudsters, attackers, and just recognising once again this is organised gangs, cross country and globally again, and not necessarily all based in the UK. They're targeting UK-based customers. And these are real call centres employing real people to do real jobs. Interestingly, we had, and worth sharing at this point, when we talk about real companies running real call centres and employing real people, we actually had someone reach out the once that had gone through a recruitment journey with a contact centre, and not realised until they were successful with the job and started that this contact centre was premised around making voice calls to gather passwords and then ultimately commit account takeover. They reached out to us just to kind of make us aware, and ultimately we use that intelligence to kind of support that. But it really paints that picture of these are not fraudsters doing fraud things. There's genuine people being recruited into roles without fully knowing the bigger picture. So when they are operating call centres, they really are operating call centres with management hierarchies and escalations and scripts and calls and everything that they go after. So it's a really challenging space in terms of how they are set up. Fraud's estimated to hit, it will be worth £200 billion a year in the UK. And on an individual level, and this is back to the victim in mind, on average, that's over £1,000 per victim. And it's more than the time to kind of remediate past that or kind of make it right post a fraud happening. And find that people are spending 60 plus hours to resolve issues that have come across based on fraud. So these are massive time investments from both an individual, but then also financially huge numbers that we're talking through. And that's not just the impact of time and effort spent, it's also the fact they are victims of fraud, and the fact that that ruins lives to the point it's undue stress, it's everything that comes with that. And that will put pressure on relationships, negative impacts on mental health. So ultimately, it's a big issue in terms of fraud and ultimately the victims there. So I suppose one of the call outs we do, first of all, is we take a much more proactive piece to this. We actually do a daily task force where we have people across the business standing up. And these are often not just fraud teams, but commercial, operations, care, but ultimately a cross-functional team across the business. And we actually meet daily and we look at the latest trends, we look at where they're pivoting towards, and make very quick decisions, changes to our journeys, and ultimately to stop how they are being successful against our customer base. We've been running this now for a long time, and to be fair, the value it's driven, we won't stop this activity now. It's a great way, especially when we consider we can put a fix in on a Friday afternoon. By Monday, they've already found the workaround and a new route through. It's that consistent, it's that relentless. We use the terminology of whack-a-mole, the arcade game you used to play. That's what it's like when it comes to fighting this. We see a lot of popularity with the SMSs going across our network in terms of delivery scams or the promise of free credits or money when it comes to stuff like online gambling and pieces like this. We've seen a recent kind of spike in terms of very CV recruitment driven scams, and the majority of these will try and impersonate one of the big brands, one of the well-known global brands, just to try and buy a little bit of credibility, with a purpose of either trying to get into conversation with a goal of getting your bank details longer term, or clicking on links that just obviously we check in don't look quite right. The other side of that, we also see in terms of that will be the submission side of things. From a Vision point of view, this would be the premise around a voice call. So this would be a random call coming through to your mobile. And these will very much play on current trends, whether it's a heavy discount on the latest phone, or a reduction in your bill, or a brand new shiny model, for instance, just in terms of buying a little bit of credibility and offering you something that sounds most of the time a little bit too good to be true.
I think that's the point, isn't it? Just to take a sort of, if it is too good to be true, or it seems unexpected, often that's probably something that is a scam.
I mean, when it comes to advice, it's the first thing to remember. If it does sound too good to be true, it likely is. But just to validate, just to check. We're all out there looking for the latest and greatest, or reductions in bills kind of thing. But absolutely, just double check before we go too far down a path and potentially leave yourself vulnerable to fraud.
I think we've all signed up to, especially there's many campaigns on this, but particularly there's Stop, Think, Fraud government campaign, and equally another one, sort of Take 5. Take a moment if you see something, and I think this happens to everyone. I myself, I got a text and it was from Windows saying that I needed to check my computer and should click on a link. I think luckily in that instance I'm savvy. Microsoft is the company that should be going, and it's a typical one. So it's look out for some of those things. For instance, typos or links that aren't the company name. It's off to some kind of lots of numbers that don't mean anything, and it is that sort of take a moment. So beyond the sort of looking and being savvy about it, what is Virgin Media O2 doing behind the scenes? What actions are you taking to help customers?
So we have a number of initiatives, and probably before slightly getting into those, just high level in terms of the fraud that we are tackling. We see from a target point of view, everything's premised, or a majority is premised around an account takeover. So goal and prize here is just trying to extract enough information via an SMS message or via a voice call, and ultimately with the premise then of trying to take over your account. And once in, they'll try and do damage. That's usually ordering hardware, wearable devices, phones, tablets, whatever that might be. Or other times it will be to gather information and then go on to use that kind of elsewhere. We also see identity theft. So this is where your identity or some of your documentation is somehow out there. And these are used to kind of create new accounts and ultimately transact with us, impersonating you. And once again, same purpose, to try and get hardware.
And then that SIM swap is another form of that as well.
Yeah, and to the point, once account takeover does happen, we very much talk about the hardware, but SIM swap, as you mentioned, one of the prizes we see and the challenge is a lot of modern authentication is premised around your mobile device being one of the factors. So SIM swap, for instance, is the routine to try and take control of one of those factors of authentication, primarily for your other accounts. This will be your other e-commerce, online stores, shopping, more importantly and more critical, banking, your financial kind of accounts. And SIM swaps are routine to do that.
And then going back to sort of what is being done behind those things. I know certainly again just to I think mention here is if you do receive a text or a call that you're suspicious about, the industry has a service called 7726. It's spam on your keypad. If there is anything you see, and you're concerned about, or you're worried, or as we say, it's too good to be true, do report it via that. And that is one of the things we see is that only 2 in 10 of scams are getting reported. So please report. It gives us that information, and then that information can be used. So James, what can we do with it?
Yeah, and then great show for 7726 in terms of the reporting of kind of fraud or spam calls and texts. All of then the operators use this data to then fuel then what we can then do within our network to ultimately protect the next victims. So for instance, when SMSs are reported, you mentioned the stat at the start of the call, around 1 billion messages blocked. A lot of this intel will come from 7726. So what you're reporting back to us in terms of what spam and fraud, we'll then take action on that. We'll take these campaigns out. We'll stop them getting delivered to our future customers. We do similar with voice spam calls. So where we identify that a number is malicious, whether it's for spam or fraud reasons, we'll actually look to block that number from our network.
And when that number, is blocked from the network, that is a number they can no longer use to essentially fraud customers.
Yeah, ultimately. We do, however, see that cycle fairly fast. So as quickly as we block something, they've already likely moved on to the next number they can leverage. But we continue that battle, and we continue to do this as quickly as we can with the intelligence we can gather. But yeah, they will constantly cycle. So it's rare that you'll see the same number coming through fairly frequently. It will always look like new and strange numbers contacting you, whether it's via SMS or voice calls.
And that's an important point. If it is a strange number, that often is an easy detection. If it is a company, they tend to have their company name come through. And we're using technology, technology, especially AI. AI is the buzzword now. And as you say, we're getting these are coming in millions and millions. And as you say, the industry has now, we've both blocked over 1 billion scam text messages. But how are we using things like AI to help us in this battle?
Yeah, we've got a fairly popular example of that from tail end of last year, hopefully well known to all out there. It's one of the biggest and ultimately pushed ourselves to do something really interesting in this space in terms of AI for good. And we brought about Daisy. So Daisy come along as an AI granny, and her core purpose is to waste the time of these attackers. There are stats out there that consumers are really eager to waste the time of scammers when they receive these calls, but the biggest challenge is time. So we went ahead and thought we'd leverage AI to help with that battle. So Daisy exists. She's trained on all the techniques that we'd normally try and advise our customers to be wary of. And this will be trying to give up passwords, key information, personal information, passwords, bank details, all of that type of stuff. She's trained across all of this. You hinted towards the antivirus type Microsoft message you received. Also trained to tackle pieces like this, where the purpose is to try and get malware put onto your machines, for instance, to take them over that way.
And just to come in there, James, I saw the AI granny Daisy. She's fantastic. I think we've got some video that may overlay with Daisy working. Essentially, time is money to these scammers. They want to get on, and if you've been savvy and you said I know that's rubbish, and you've hung up the call or you've ignored the text, they want to get on to another one. And the fantastic thing here is she keeps them on the phone or keeps things and. Essentially, I can't find this, I can't find that. Sort of what you might understand as an elderly person trying to use a computer, and I think really interesting way of doing it, and it's such a great idea. But equally beyond sort of the obvious there is technology behind the scenes that is blocking these and learning what texts are coming through. I think it's a company called Hire as well. You use for that. Explain to us what's happening there.
To Hire, you referenced, this is us also leveraging AI within all of the traffic that goes across our kind of mobile network in terms of voice. So all of the calls that are traversing our network, we now have AI capability to look at those and look at pattern detection, look at what are good calls versus what could be potentially spam. Hire also locks in once again to the 7726 service, so it's also visible to what you are reporting back, and it's a way of you helping train these AI models. And Hire does two key purposes for us. First of all, we've got the brand element, so you'll start to see more genuine and legitimate calls branded properly. So, for instance, if you was to receive a call from VMO2, you have that brand clearly visible on your phone, so you can see that first kind of check of legitimacy. The second part of that is ultimately prevention or giving you that insight in what is potentially spam or fraud or a scam call. It does this through looking at all of the traffic, the reports from 7726. And what we can go ahead is then label that call as it arrives at your phone. So not just deliver that call and have your phone ring. You'll also see that little bit of insight to just warn you that it's potentially scam, potentially fraud, and ultimately and it's designed to just put you on edge a tiny bit and just be wary of what conversation happens next. There is probably an ask around that in terms of making sure you do leverage Hire. We roll this out for free across our entire customer base. The only thing you need to have is either an Android device or an iOS device updated to iOS 18 or newer. As long as you do that, make sure it's switched on. You'll see that label for free hitting every time we deliver a call out to your phone.
And Daisy, she's getting to work. She's AI, so she's there, and she can spend as much time as she wants. But what's the number of calls that she can handle?
Yeah, so whilst we've had Daisy on, she's fielded over 1,000 calls. These are spam calls. And this equates to thousands of hours ultimately in terms of the time she's spent occupying scammers and fraudsters and ultimately stop that time getting through to our customers. Probably a couple of call outs, and these are the really interesting bits. When I've kind of listened back or seen some of the transcripts from these calls, my favourite stat is the longest call she's held is 40 minutes. So that is keeping a fraudster on a call for a solid 40 minutes.
So that's a fraudster who was trying to waste your time. We're now wasting their time.
Yeah, and ultimately that's 40 minutes that a customer's not had to have that conversation, and that's 40 minutes of their working day, so to speak. They are organised crime. They are call centres. They are, set up to do this professionally. That's 40 minutes of their day that we've wasted that they were not successful somewhere else. We saw Daisy field calls across industry. She wasn't there just to speak to potential fraud for VMO2. She tackled conversations across sector, whether that was government type scams, banking, delivery scams. All of the major MNOs and telcos were also had calls routed into Daisy just via the way she was deployed. And every technique under the sun was kind of tried against Daisy, and she was trained to ultimately just waste that time back. Hearing back some of the pieces, obviously one of the core things that fraudsters are normally after is an SMS OTAC or one-time password, one-time access code. She's got this great trick that when that's asked for, she'll get distracted by other messages in her SMS, and it's a couple of minutes every time, but just that delay that would be normal and plausible. It's just really good to see when we've heard these calls back.
And I've watched some of the when she went live, and it's fascinating how natural she is, and you could think it's your grandmother, and you can naturally think it's someone who's just having a bit of trouble with their PC or finding some details, and again, it's really I think it's really clever.
I think in terms of how she is, she's, there's a few reasons why Daisy exists as she does, but she does personify one of the vulnerable demographics out there. Those are not necessarily tech savvy or fully understanding of what online or digital experiences are, and ultimately the value of a password or a one-time password. If you're not used to banking or transacting online, not realizing what that one-time password could go and unlock behind the scenes. So she's been really great at trying to get that message out, and one of our biggest challenges is for all of the fraud warnings and advice that whether we publish on the website, we kind of pull out there, or just the real time in the moment stuff. There's a challenge still of it. Sometimes it just doesn't still resonate with fraud. You don't really realize you are a victim until you've been one. Rather than other crime, you can kind of see it unfolding.
And equally, it's worth saying as well, I think it's not just the elderly who get caught. I think they tend to be a larger number of that, unfortunately. But even the most tech-savvy people can get caught for this. What they can put out and what they ask for and when they ask can be really, really quite clever. And again, I think we want people to ensure that they are safely using their phones, and the kind of technology here is helping that battle.
Yeah, absolutely. And even to the point of being wary of, we know the prize is a password or a one-time key the majority of the time, but these calls will also just gather information. This information is then shared behind the scenes. So even just confirming an email address on one call then becomes information that they then know about you for the next call. So it's just really been wary of when you are giving out or sharing information that you've done that validation of legitimate. Summarize kind of at the end some of the kind of core tips, but if you were ever in doubt, just hang up and a quick web search for a genuine number, and every company, including ourselves, would welcome you hanging up and calling us back to ensure it is a genuine call.
I think that goes back to that point. Take a moment, again, if it's too good to be true, or especially if someone is pushing you to give information, that is not how companies operate. They will have security measures in place. If someone is trying to be savvy about it, be aware, and watch out. And I think that's that stop, think fraud again, or take 5, exactly that. So it is a problem, and we're hearing some of the really fantastic stuff that Virgin Media are doing and the wider industry are doing. As we said, we go back, billions of messages out there and billions have been blocked. But what about what's the role of government here? I think it's very easy to blame one side or the other, but what can we do together? Certainly, as an industry, we're working on the Sector Fraud Charter. There's the second stage of that at the moment. That's ongoing, and we're looking to sort of again work with government as what we could do. But what is it do you see from a company that we'd like to see more on that side of things? What asks have we got of government?
And I suppose in terms of the ask and the challenge with all of this, so we already work with law enforcement, and we've got some real good relationships in terms of dedication and successes where we've been able to tackle this with law enforcement. I think when it comes to this on a UK and global level, when it comes to fighting fraud, police are under-resourced, and they're not structurally set up to be able to really help tackle this. Fraud by nature is really complex and ultimately cross-border. Having a local police force invested, you'll likely find this crosses many jurisdictions across the UK alone. Fraud itself is incredibly complex when it comes to investigations and kind of supporting. I think the challenge here, once again, from law enforcement, local teams don't always have that resource available. And in fact, there's at least 3 forces in the UK that don't have a single investigator dedicated to fraud. So before we've even started, there's a challenge there for us, risking success.
So it's a national issue, even international. We need a national focus.
Yeah, and to that point, look, the ask is for that centralised specialist agency. Local expertise is vital, especially when you think of how these devices and how this happens locally and local police force involvement is. but actually does need that centralized specialist agency that can kind of coordinate this at that national level. Is one of the biggest asks in terms of supporting this fight.
Excellent. And this has been a fascinating discussion. I mean, to take, use an analogy, look under the boot or the bonnet. This is hugely complex. It's very difficult. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of investment going on in the AI, in the sort of algorithms that block text and blacklist text. And I think what we've got to remember is, I think we've heard some fantastic stuff, James, from you and what VMO2 are doing. The daily look at this, it's not something that is half cooked for you. This is daily being looked at and people changing and companies changing the way they react to it. But equally, I do want to stress as well, if you are a victim of this, if anyone listening here, please pass on 7726, report that, because a lot of that information that comes in via that is what helps us to then stop what, the texts that are coming through and stop and learn more about what the scams that are being used. Again, I think I'd like to say here, and James, I'm sure you'd agree here, is that point about stop and taking time. If it's too good to be true, if it's an offer that seems fantastic, or if it's people asking for personal information, be wary, be careful, think about it. Companies will not ask for your PIN codes and the like. If you're being pushed into that, it's likely a scam. So take your time, think about it. Don't be afraid, as James said, to hang up or ignore something. If someone needs you properly, they will find a way to get to you. But make sure that if you aren't comfortable or you're suspicious, report it or ignore it. I think where we go from here is please check out both Virgin Media's website. You've got lots of information on this. We will have those links in the description. Equally, Mobile UK itself, we have our website, which has got all this brought together for all operators. Take care, be aware. And James, I'd just like to say a big thank you for that. That's been really fascinating. There's a lot to learn there. And for everyone, please do, of course, as usual, if you've liked this episode, subscribe and click that like button. You can find our other episodes on YouTube Music, YouTube, and Spotify and Apple. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.